Chapter 10 of Moon Bear. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe I thought I'd see the bears running freely in the building, but in the harsh glare of the neon lights there were 8 cages, set in 2 rows on either side of a long central drainage channel. The cages were being held up from the floor on metal posts fixed into concrete. Beneath each crate, the concrete was crushed in bear filth. Trails of brownish liquid ran through the drainage gutter. The doctor put his hands on his hips. "These are all my bears," he said. "Come, Mountain Boy, come and see." I couldn't move. I just stared. They didn't look like bears at first. They were huge black shapes filling up the space in each cage. Some lay, their paws dangling through the bars, others sat, swaying from side to side. I could see they were moon bears by the crescents of their white fur on their chests. "Come on, Moon Bear. Oh, I'm sorry. Come, Mountain Boy," said the doctor. He pulled my arm. Don't tell me you're scared." I walked behind him along the row. He ran his metal bar along the metals of the cage fronts. The noise rang out inside the building. The bears became restless. They hooted and moaned and moved to the far side of the cage, pressing themselves against the bars. They were so big, so close, so real. I never knew bears could be kept like this. What did the doctor keep them for? I followed the doctor to the end cage. Inside was a huge bear, much bigger than any of the others. Unlike the other bears, this bear didn't cower from the doctor's approach. It faced him. It pressed its head against the bars. The doctor smashed his metal bar against the cage. The bear exploded, snarling and lashing out with its paws. I shot backwards. The doctor laughed. "This is bitter. My first bear." He held up his left hand, and I noticed for the first time that the 2 of the doctor's fingers were missing. The doctor pulled something from under the neckline of his t-shirt. Bear teeth were threaded to a strip of leather around his head, or around his t-shirt. Bear teeth were around his neck. The doctor leaned close. He took my fingers, so I took his teeth. He struck Bitter in the belly with the metal bar. "We have an understanding, don't we, Bear?" Bitter lashed out and bit at the cage bars. I could see the line of broken teeth along his jaw. The bear pushed his teeth through the bars, his long claws lashing the air. I backed away into another cage, where the bear inside groaned and pressed itself against the furthest bars. "And that's one's Mama Bear," said the doctor, banging his bar against her cage. "She was pregnant when she got here. That's her cub over there." Mama Bear flattened her ears and moaned. She rolled her eyes and the whiteness showing. The mouth hung open. She panted in the heat. Her cub in the cage next was a full-grown bear. He swung his head from side to side, hitting his head against the bars each time. "Dumb bear does that all day," said the doctor. "Only stops swinging his head when he eats." The doctor scraped up a dried bear mess of the concrete with his gum boots and wrinkled his nose. He took a wire yard broom and scratcher from Eggnog and pressed it into his hand. "Your job is to clean these floors. Make sure you do a better job than the last worker here." I watched the doctor walk away, banging his bar against the cages. He paused at the sliding doors and swung around. "Eggnog," he shouted, "I will be back tomorrow. We will show Mountain Boy how we milk the bears." I held the motorbike rep into life, and I could see the doctor ride out through the red gates. The bears seemed to relax and shuffle in their cages. "This way," said Eggnog. It was the first time I heard him speak. He pointed to yard brooms and the hoses. "Come and find me when you're done." I watched him walk away to the office. Despite the heat, Eggnog closed the door, and soon a fog of cigarette smoke streamed from the office view. I stared along the line of bears. Could I really work here? What if the bears escape? Bitter looked as if he wanted to rip me apart. I didn't want to go to I didn't want to get in the paw's reach of the bears. I looked along the line of bears and the dried muck beneath them. I could make sure I could do a better job of cleaning these bears than the last worker. I pulled the hose out to its full length and turned on the faucet. I never used a hose before. It rattled like a live snake as the ground and as the water flowed through it from the faucet. The water sprayed with such force I had to grab the end of the hose with both hands to stop it from spraying everywhere. I hosed and scraped the concrete floor. The dirt beneath the cages were so dry and crusted that I had to let the water soak through it to soften it. My arms ached as I was pouring with sweat. But I thought of Ma, and I wanted to make the doctor pleased. I wanted to show that I could do this job. I wanted to make sure Ma received the money. As soon as the day heat rose outside, so did the heat inside. I could feel the sun's rays pressing down on the iron roof above. I drank from the hose and sprayed myself with water. I couldn't see any water in the cages, so I put my fingers in the end of the hose and sprayed the bears too. They seemed to enjoy it, letting the cool air soak through their thick fur and run on the ground below. They rolled in their cramped cages and licked the water from their paws and fur. I noticed the front paws of some bears were missing, and the leg ended in a stump. I thought of the snare trap Snowy and I set in the forest games. We caught a mouse deer once, where the wire had caught its leg, and the flesh was skinned and black by the time we found it. We'd killed it quickly and felt bad for letting it suffer. I'd wonder if the bears had been caught in snare traps too. I didn't go near Bitter. I sprayed him with water, but he shook it off, staring at me all the time. I had to crouch low to escape the dirt beneath his cage, watching him, all keeping out of the reach of his swung paws of low. I worked hard all day. I worked until I heard Agnes' footsteps behind me. He looked around the building and scuffled at the feet at some visible pieces of dirt. Steam rose from the wet bears and washed floors. Okay, he said. We're done here for today. He reached up for the light switch, and the building flickered into darkness. I popped the brooms and scraper back against the wall. Do we feed them too? Egna dropped his cigarette on the floor and crushed it beneath his heel. Not today. We don't feed them the day before we milk them. It's better that way. Egnan pulled the sliding door of the bar door across. Go on, go, he said. Closing the sliding door, took his bicycle from the wall and ushered me out, locking the metal gates behind us. I watched him cycle down the road and become lost among the traffic. The sun had arced across the sky and sinking towards the rooftops. The day was still hot. Heat hung in the air trapped from below the city smog. My head felt light. All I wanted to do was eat and lie down in my room. On the far side of the road I could see came with two other boys his age. They leaned against the wire fence of his father's yard, watching me. I stepped out of the road. The traffic didn't stop. It was a steady stream, most of the cars moving out of the city. I took a chance and dashed across through traffic. A motorbike had to swerve to miss me. Cam shook his head and the other boy slapped on him on the back and laughed. They held out their hands while Cam put coins into their palms. I walked head down past them. Hey, Tam. I turned around. Cam was running to catch up with me. How was it today? It was okay, I said. Did you see the bears? I kept on walking to my room. Yes, I said. What are they like? Big, I said. I put my hand out to open the door to my room, but Cam stepped in front of me. He glanced back to the house and lowered his voice. You know what happened to the last worker? He was killed by a bear. I stared at him. Mauled to death, he said. That's why you got the job. I kicked off my gumboots and paired them together by the door. Are you going to stay? Are you really going to work there? Said Cam. I reached out for the handle. What else can I do? I left Cam standing in the doorway and stepped inside of my room. A bowl of rice and fish and a plate of fruit were laid out on the table. My clothes had been washed and dried and hung clean on a nail behind the door. I took the towel to head to wash into the near to take the smell of the sweat and bear away. Cam was watching me from the doorway. I saw one once, he said. Some lodgers brought one on their truck. They'd bound it up, and it still managed to get free. It was one crazy bear. It was a good thing the yard gates were closed. We had to stay inside until the doctor managed to sedate it. Ma said she didn't want any more bears coming to the yard. She says it's bad enough knowing they're so near. They're locked up, I said. Cam leaned into me. Then tell me, he said, just how the last bear got out. And across the yard I could hear Cam's mother calling. Your ma wants you, I said. Cam reached into his pocket. Maybe you'd like to buy a small flashlight from me. Maybe you'll need one in the night? I looked down at the 3 flashlights Cam pulled out. Brand new, Cam said. They all have new batteries. I have no money. I said, well, maybe you could take one and pay me back. I shook my head. The money I earn is sent to Ma. Cam's mother called again. Cam shrugged his shoulder. Oh, well, it's your loss. I watched him walk into the house and sit with his family around the table. Then I stepped into the shower and turned the water on full. I let the water run across me and soak deep in my hair. Maybe I should open the door and walk away. I could keep on walking through the city and somehow find my way back home. But it was an impossible dream. I was trapped here as the bears. I stretched out my arms to feel the wall in the shower. Maybe this was how bears felt, caged and far from home. Maybe they were too scared, just as scared too. I thought about tomorrow and what the doctor had said. He said we'll milk the bears. I've milked Chief Buffalo and when we lived in the mountains. I filled a pot with rich, frothy milk for an orphan calf. But the buffaloes were gentle creatures. How, I wondered, do you milk a bear?